Penn State's depth chart could be in trouble with some of the latest injuries.
You are Locked On Nittany Lions, your daily podcast on the Penn State Nittany Lions. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Penn State's defensive depth chart does not look the best right now. James Franklin gave us some bad news on tight end Andrew Rappleyea. And was it just poor tackling that led to Penn State's defensive struggles in the first half against Bowling Green? This is Locked On Nittany Lions. I am your host, Zach Seyko, and thanks so much for making us your first listen and watch. Every single day, we are free and available wherever you get your podcasts, including YouTube. And today's show is brought to you by Ultimate College Football HC. It's the brand new mobile game that is completely free, has no ads, and is 100% playable offline. Begin your coaching legacy today with Ultimate College Football HC. Of course, I greatly appreciate a like on this episode, but more importantly, let me know your thoughts down in the comment section about Penn State's depth chart as injuries are starting to mount. And it's not the best case scenario here with KJ Winston potentially being sidelined. He was missing from practice. So these are practice takeaways based on the viewing session of who was available and what James Franklin told us about Andrew Rappley's availability moving forward. But I want to start with the defense because Penn State is stuck with its situation unless guys get healthy fast. And it's not an ideal situation. KJ Winston is clearly, it's not up for debate, is one of the most talented and one of the most valuable players on this team. I would say that he and Abdul Carter are 1A, 1B in terms of how important they are to not only the defense, but the overall roster. And he was missing from practice for the Tuesday viewing session just yesterday. Against Bowling Green, he was on the sideline in pads, but no helmet. And based on the way that James Franklin addressed it in the post-game press conference, hey, what was Winston's availability? And, kind of the same non-answer typically around what we presume to be an injury of, I can't talk about those things because out of respect to the player and the families, the same saying as it normally goes. And that's understandable. I'm not trying to debate that, but KJ Winston is not available. We presume it's an injury and we don't know how serious it is. Winston, why he is so valuable is because of not only his talent, but what he's able to do. So Penn State isn't just running three safeties in this defense and running a 4-2-5 just because. KJ Winston, you might as well consider him both a linebacker and a safety. He's essentially that third linebacker for Penn State's defense. He's one of Penn State's best overall run defenders, according to the analytics and according to the eye test. KJ Winston is an all-around tackler. He's not afraid to go after the ball carrier. He's not afraid to make a tackle and has not logged a missed tackle in his college football career. So to have a player like that, who is now a veteran in his third season with Penn State and a potential first-round pick if everything goes correctly in next year's NFL draft, to have a player like that sidelined for who knows how long. Is it just the bye week? Is it Kent State? Is it for a month? Is it for more than that? We can't assume anything. But you need him back on the football field as soon as possible. And this has a trickle-down effect to it. So if Winston's sidelined, let's say hypothetically for just the next game, Kent State. Okay, Penn State can still win without KJ Winston. I know what just happened with Penn State and a MAC team. But Kent State isn't contending for a MAC conference title like a Bowling Green is and honestly deserves a lot more credit than it was getting. They are one of the worst rated teams in all of FBS. We're talking bottom five. So Penn State could win purely with its backups here in this case. So now the safeties are affected immediately because KJ Winston is a safety, even though he has linebacker traits, right? The safeties, Jalen Reed and Zach Seyko, talk about Iron Men. Those two have 127 and 120 snaps between the two of them respectively, 247 snaps together. After them, who's next? So your three safeties that, there's all the talent in the world and you're playing them and they've, like I said, Iron Men. They're playing a lot of snaps, by far the most on the defensive roster, but now Winston might be unavailable. Okay, so you still have Wheatley and you have Reed, and Reed's playing out of his mind. I think he's one of the biggest breakout stars this season in addition to a Zane Durant. But talking about safety, after them, you have Dejon Lane. Okay, Dejon Lane, true freshman. They intend to burn his red shirt. He, along with Cooper Cousins, have the green light so far out of all of the true freshmen. But he's only played 3 snaps on defense so far. There's optimism for Lane. James Franklin, other coaches and players have gone out of their way to praise Dejon Lane to this point in time. But he's only played 3 snaps on defense against West Virginia and Bowling Green. 8 snaps on special teams, but 3 snaps on defense. And he could be on the football field in the blink of an eye if they're going to run 3 safety sets and Winston's not available. Do you move back to Dakari Nelson? Okay, Dakari Nelson moves down from safety to linebacker, which makes sense because the linebacker depth is in question, which I will get to. Dakari Nelson was moved to linebacker. Have him add weight? Do you just scrap that plan altogether? Has he been adding the weight? What weight is he up to? Could he even move back if you had him put on 10 pounds? He was 219, right? 220. If you had him bump up to 230, and that nutrition staff is hard at work, so they get results. If Nelson happened to put on that linebacker weight, is he even fit to move back to safety where he's been practicing all along? So that's a possibility if he hasn't gone through the entire nutritional plan just yet. There's Lamont Payne, who hasn't seen any playing time yet. Same thing, optimism. He was a solid recruit not too long ago, moved from cornerback to safety. But if there's optimism for him, then show it, because he is in his second year as a redshirt freshman. Play him. He has no playing time to this point. Tyrese Mills has been around with the program, transferred in from Lackawanna Community College a while ago, is that hybrid linebacker safety, but same thing, 3 snaps defensively. He is an option, but solely on his veteran experience. I could see Tyrese Mills getting into the game against Penn State quite a bit if the opportunity presents itself. So now let's go to the linebackers. Penn State has 5 linebackers that it can trust. Tony Rojas, Kobe King, Tyler Elsdon, Dom DeLuca, Tamir Robinson. And again, consider KJ Winston almost as an alternative linebacker. But Tamir Robinson was not seen at the viewing session. Again, same thing that I reported last week on this podcast was that Robinson was missing and that James Franklin addressed it, that linebacker depth is not ideal. And Robinson was still missing, meaning that it's presumably an injury and not a good one at that as well. So he is one of the 5. Now, he's not the best of the 5. It's clearly Kobe King and the emergence of Tony Rojas as he is breaking out early in the season, which is a great sign for Penn State, but you still need depth. This is by far the thinnest position group on the depth chart. And then you got to turn to the true freshmen. Anthony Specca, Kari Jackson, are they ready? Are they ready? Because they haven't played at all. And are they going to be considered to burn their red shirts down the road? We also don't know when Keon Wiley returns. He's not out indefinitely, but what is his timeline? We don't exactly know when Wiley's going to be back, and it's wide open as far as when his timeline is. Could he return middle of the season, end of the regular season, into a hypothetical playoff game? Because that's what that means when Penn State and James Franklin say, oh, this player's not out for the season. Okay, that's true because he could technically play in round 1 of a playoff game. And it's like, man, that doesn't help the injury report. So Winston being considered an extra linebacker in this case still doesn't help. Tamir Robinson and KJ Winston, you just hope that they can return to the practice field and then the football field sooner rather than later. And that's my point. So now we pivot to Abdul Carter because I already started to have the discussion because everybody else has been asking about it. Should Penn State move him back from defensive end to linebacker? I don't think you can move him back. I don't think Penn State wants to move him back because they can't, because then defensive end takes a hit. So here's the trickle-down effect that I've brought this conversation through. KJ Winston being the domino at safety. Okay, so now you have an issue at safety. Then he's also, again, a hybrid linebacker just because of how good he is at tackling and in run defense. Well, look, Tamir Robinson's out, so now the linebackers are in dire straits. Then you have Abdul Carter, which you have the flexibility. If you really absolutely needed to move him to linebacker, you could, but it is still not ideal because then you're working with 3 defensive ends realistically. Denai Dennis-Sutton, Smith Vilbert, and Amin Vanover. And speaking of Amin Vanover, he was just charged with misdemeanors driving under the influence of marijuana for an incident that happened back in early August. Is there going to be a punishment? James Franklin was asked about it at practice, and he gave a non-answer referring to the statement that Penn State released, but said that they don't really disclose what kind of punishment happens for these kind of off-the-field situations. So does Penn State intend him to suspend? Does Penn State intend to suspend him against Kent State or Illinois? What kind of punishment does this invoke from the football team here? Again, this incident happened in early August. It's a legal situation, so I can only comment so much on it. So I agree with Penn State in its statement that it released. And then your options at defensive end, kind of like linebacker, kind of like safety, you have young players who have potential, but they're not ready now. Joseph Mpoye and Mason Robinson are not ready to play actively, and that's why they haven't played any snaps. They went out and got Jordan Mayer from the transfer portal, and he's only played one defensive snap to this point. Defensively, they're in a bind right now. They are in a bind right now when it comes to the depth chart unless they are able to get healthy. Bottom line, out of all of this, the bye week could not have come at a more convenient time. The first bye week, they had that second one from USC into Wisconsin in the later part of October. But the bye week early in the season, before Kent State and before they open up Big Ten Conference play at home against Illinois, could not have come at a more convenient time to make sure that KJ Winston is back and healthy. Tamir Robinson. But we're presuming that these are best case scenario situations, that these are short-term things and they will be available sooner rather than later. The same can't be said for Penn State tight end Andrew Rappleyea. So we'll talk about it on the offense and what James Franklin said about the backup tight end coming up next on Locked On Nittany Lions. And today's show is brought to you by Ultimate College Football HC. Hey, Locked On Nittany Lion fans, I'm excited to share a game with you that I know you will love, and it's Ultimate College Football HC. You step right into the role of being a head coach and you lead your team to glory. Imagine coaching the Nittany Lions. From recruiting players to managing training camps and scholarships, every crucial decision is in your hands. Now can you handle the pressure? What I love most is the ability to call offensive plays during the games. That allows you to shape your season. That allows you to shape your program's future. Ultimate College Football HC is free. It's ad-free, and it's playable offline. So that's perfect for gaming on the go. And as listeners, as viewers of Locked On Nittany Lions, you can use my promo code LOCKEDONCFB to help you get a head start in the game. You go to the game store and you can get a free boost with that code LOCKEDONCFB. And to download the game, all you got to do is go to ultimate-cfb.com, or you can find it in the app stores. That's Ultimate College Football HC. Begin your coaching legacy today. Today's episode is also brought to you by Gametime. You got to download the Gametime app because buying tickets to your favorite events should not be stressful. Gametime has a new feature called Gametime Picks that makes getting tickets to your favorite live events even easier. Gametime Picks filters out the fluff to show you only incredible deals on great seats, so you don't have to waste your time searching through thousands and thousands of tickets. And if you go over to Gametime right now, I have it pulled up, you can see tickets for Kent State versus Penn State, and that kickoff is now at 3:30, but you can see tickets, and with the Gametime Picks, they already show you the best deals, the cheapest deals. You can get tickets as low as $18 with the all-in pricing up front. So that's fees and everything included, $18 a piece for the lowest price tickets. And then they'll show you the amazing deals. You can get upper sideline seats for just $38 a piece. That's over at Gametime. Take the guesswork out of buying tickets with Gametime. Download the Gametime app, create an account, and use promo code LOCKEDONCOLLEGE for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create that account, use promo code LOCKEDONCOLLEGE for $20 off your first purchase. Download Gametime today. Last minute tickets, lowest price, guaranteed. At his post-practice press conference yesterday, James Franklin announced that Andrew Rappleyea was out with a long-term injury. That can be defined as a lot of things. Again, it's not out for the season, but long-term injury. What that says to me is at least 4 to 6 weeks, maybe even longer. And thank goodness Penn State has so much depth at the tight end spot. Tyler Warren is obviously the lead tight end, and look at what he did against Bowling Green. But then after that, Khalil Dinkins was missing time and then had returned to practice and played limited snaps against Bowling Green. I think he played about 10 maybe max. He didn't play that much against the Falcons. Rappleyea didn't play at all. He was a late addition to the injury report, and he was at practice last week too. So something must have happened in that 48, 72-hour window leading up to the game beforehand. So now you get Dinkins back, but then you lose Rappleyea, and I think those two were competing for reps at the number 2 tight end spot. Rappleyea, I think, has all the potential in the world. He was heavily recruited. He was one of the best tight end prospects in the class of 2023, and I think eventually he would have pushed Khalil Dinkins for more reps at that backup tight end spot. And with Dinkins out, I mean, Rappleyea wasn't asked to do a lot. He was asked to block, and he had okay performances. With Dinkins also being out, it gave an opportunity for Luke Reynolds to showcase what he could do. And if you look at the analytics, you watch some of the film, it's not the best performances, but that's understandable because Luke Reynolds is a true freshman. But I think in terms of being a true freshman and what he's shown so far, it is impressive that he's able to handle blocking, going up against third, fourth year defensive ends as a first year true freshman. James Franklin has talked about that, how tight end is one of the toughest positions to develop at in college football, because when you're 17, 18, depending on when you come into the program, you might be 17 years old, 18, best case scenario, you're 19. And then you have to go up against blocking guys like Denai Dennis Sutton, who have been doing this for 3, 4, 5, maybe even 6 years, weigh 260 pounds. And when you're in high school, if you don't enroll early, you're coming in at 200 pounds, 210 maybe. And Luke Reynolds, so I'm not trying to grill him for saying, well, he could have played better. That's not it at all. It's admirable, it's respectable, because they trust him as a true freshman, 18, 19-year-old who hasn't played any college football up until this point, to take on blocking assignments against 250, 60-pound defensive ends who have been doing this for 4 or 5 seasons. That's impressive, and Luke Reynolds deserves a lot of credit. And again, young players get better down the course of the season. So he might be okay right now. The analytics might be critical of his performance, but that's after 2 games. Imagine after 5 games, 8 games, a full season down the stretch, he might be a reliable target in this offense when week 11, week 12 rolls around for Penn State. Tyler Warren has complimented and said that Luke Reynolds will be a very special tight end for the future at Penn State. I think he can make an impact now, and he's going to have to. He's still in that number 3. He's already ascended past Joey Schlaffer, who has been here with the program. Jerry Cross, who's been in the program for 3 years now at Penn State. So this is the tight end situation. Thank goodness Penn State has as many tight ends as it does, and Tyler Warren being a superstar. But you get Khalil Dinkins back. It's just not good. It's just not good news to lose somebody that is Rappleyea, because he is in his second year. He could have been a breakout player for Penn State. And I think he offered you the similar talent, different skill set, but similar level of talent between Rappleyea and Dinkins, that they were a number 2 tight ends. And that's what, so now the responsibility turns to Luke Reynolds. How quickly can you adapt to the game? How much better can you get week by week by week? And I've been impressed, again, with what Luke Reynolds has shown, even though it hasn't been perfect, and it's obviously not going to be, but he is way ahead of schedule for where most tight ends would be. In a perfect world for Penn State, they would love to redshirt Luke Reynolds. I don't think they're going to have that option here, but it is good to see him handle the workload and the playing time accordingly so far. But Andrew Rappleyea being out, it bodes well for Penn State that they get Khalil Dinkins back, because if Rappleyea and Dinkins were to miss both at the same time, an extended period of time, then it does get a little bit of a murky situation, and you can't run those 2 tight end sets, and that helps. That domino effect again. I go back to the defense and how one thing kind of leads to another. Having these tight ends allows you to run Andy Kotelnicki's system. Andy Kotelnicki is an offensive line and tight ends guy. That's his background. That's his assistant coaching before he's made it all the way up to play calling and offensive coordinator at his core. And I've said this, he is a tight ends and an offensive line type of coach. Well, you have so many tight ends to work with here in this offense, not as many as the preseason started, right? But you're only missing the one because Khalil Dinkins has come back. He is available moving forward, and they tried to work him back into the lineup. Not too much, and James Franklin acknowledged that they weren't going to push Dinkins into action and use him cautiously in that game against Bowling Green. But my point is, thank goodness Penn State has the depth that it does at tight end, because that helps out the running game, right? Penn State wants to run 2 tight end sets. If you're going to run those 2 tight end sets and be able to do good things in the running game, which they've done so far, help out the offensive line, you need those extra blockers. Then you have that play action element, and then that's why Tyler Warren was able to be schemed wide open. Bowling Green had no answer for him. He was able to get open on his own, but Andy Kotelnicki's play calling and diversity in the offense certainly helped out with that a lot too. So they have the players to do it. It's just not good news because Rappleyea was one of the top 3 tight ends on this team, and he's out with a long-term injury. The good news is he's not out for the season. He's not out for the season, but he's going to be missing for some time. Khalil Dinkins, you can have him healthy. You have Luke Reynolds, who is just going to continue to get better. He's just going to get better week by week by week. Joey Schlaffer, another tight end in that class of 2023, comparable to an Andrew Rappleyea. They were both in that same class. They were both top 10 tight ends in the country in that respective class. And Jerry Cross was a 4-star too. I wonder, because he has talent. Is Penn State's tight end room is just that good that a former 4-star and a top 10 tight end in his own right in the class of 2022 happens to be on the bottom part of the depth chart, and maybe he does get some playing time down the road in this case based on who's available here. So not good news. The injuries continue to mount. Defensively, they're really going to have to adapt on the fly and hope for a best case scenario. This isn't the worst thing to happen to Penn State's offense, but obviously it's not ideal. You don't want any players to be injured. You don't want any players to be unavailable, especially with what Penn State wants to do offensively. They want to run multiple tight ends. They want to be effective in the ground game. Andrew Rappleyea not being available certainly doesn't help the cause, but it's not the end all because of the potential that Luke Reynolds offers. Khalil Dinkins is back, and Tyler Warren, of course, is the superstar tight end and a clear-cut top 5 tight end in the entire nation. So that's kind of all the not so great news for Penn State football. James Franklin made an interesting comment, though, addressing the game against Bowling Green, saying the biggest issue for Penn State's defense was tackling. Might have to agree to disagree here, Coach. We'll talk about that in the final segment here on Locked On Nittany Lions. Today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. You've heard us talk a lot about FanDuel, and of course, it's America's #1 sports book. Well, we have something a little different for you. Now through September 22nd, all FanDuel customers can bet just $5. $5, that's all it takes, and you'll get a 3-week free trial of NFL Sunday Ticket from YouTube and YouTube TV. Then with a YouTube TV base plan, you'll be able to watch every regular season Sunday afternoon out-of-market game, and all you need is a Google account and a current form of payment, and you can cancel at any time, so there's no obligation. All you got to do is visit FanDuel.com and download America's #1 sportsbook. And if you look over at FanDuel right now, so there are no lines for Penn State versus Kent State just yet as they're in the bye week, of course. So over in the NFL, you can bet on other local Pennsylvania teams. The Steelers and the Eagles are in action. Steelers play the Broncos. They're on the road. They are a -3 favorite on the spread. The Eagles are at home hosting the Falcons. They are a 6.5-point favorite at home in that game. If you like those lines, you can bet them all right now over at FanDuel.com. Again, that is FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. And today's episode is also brought to you by Team Ticker. Team Ticker is the one-of-a-kind sports sign for all college sports fans. If you're watching this episode of Locked On Nittany Lions, that right there is a Team Ticker sign to my left. And I'll describe it for my audio listeners. Team Ticker is a 1.5 by 2 foot wall sign featuring the Nittany Lion logo that has a cool retro-looking LED display. The display is updated daily with fresh content such as a countdown to the next game, schedules, standings, stats, and news. It is super fun, and it's a great way to stay connected with Penn State sports. Whether it's football, men's and women's basketball, baseball, soccer, or softball, Team Ticker has got you covered. And you'll never miss a game as the high-tech retro display provides a countdown to the next big game as well as daily updates to the latest team news and so much more. Team Ticker is the ultimate addition to your Nittany Lion sports collection. And once you hang it on the wall, it's going to be the talk of your fellow Penn State fans. If you're looking for that one eye-catching item to showcase your team pride or a gift for the special Nittany Lion fan that you know, go to teamticker.com and pick up your Team Ticker today. Team Ticker is a one-of-a-kind sports sign. If you go to teamticker.com right now and use my promo code LOCKEDON, you'll receive $50 off your Team Ticker purchase. Once again, that's promo code LOCKEDON for $50 off your Team Ticker purchase over at teamticker.com. So according to Coach Franklin, the biggest issue defensively against Bowling Green was the tackling. And I'll agree to disagree here. It was certainly a big issue, but I wouldn't argue that it was the biggest. I mean, look, there's a lot of reasons. I've seen people point to the fact that, hey, the players didn't execute. That Tom Allen actually wasn't the reason for the overall reason for the first half going the way that it did in Bowling Green having success. Players were out of position. Guys were running wide open. I point to scheme. That's what I pointed to scheme. I pointed to game planning as that. Simply put, again, I feel like Tom Allen was outcoached in the first half of that game against Bowling Green. And then after that, players weren't tackling because they were out of position, right? All those things. Because they certainly didn't have that issue against West Virginia. James Franklin agreed with that sentiment that they were so much better tackling against the Mountaineers than they were against the Falcons. But you can't tackle a guy like Harold Fannin Jr., who was the 6'4", 6'5" tight end and the most effective weapon in Bowling Green's offense. When he's completely uncovered, you're not going to be able to immediately tackle him, and he's already tough to bring down as it is. So that's why I think tackling is almost, and again, he's a head coach, he's a football coach, so he knows better than me. If James Franklin says it's the tackling, then it's the tackling. But from my point of view, it's just tough for me not to sit back and say that, hey, Bowling Green put together an excellent game plan. They fired on all cylinders, they were executing, and it wasn't until the second half to where there was some pushback. So I put that first on the defensive coordinator in Tom Allen. Then the players not being able to execute their assignments and missing tackles, I think is a byproduct of what is going on initially with the game plan. It's a combination of everything here. Okay, so being outcoached, Tom Allen was outcoached in the first half. Poor tackling. That was bad. Poor execution. Guys were missing assignments, or when they were in position, they just weren't making the plays. So there's that missed tackling. I also think that there was a lack of motivation, a lack of energy. Look, you're going from a regional rivalry, a historic rivalry from Penn State versus West Virginia and all the implications that it has, and you still get to own the bragging rights. And then it's Bowling Green, a team that you haven't played since 1998 from the MAC conference. So you can understand why there's not enough juice in that game going from on the road in Morgantown, where it is a hostile environment, to, yeah, your home opener for the 2024 season, but against Bowling Green. And something that's actually pointed out that these week 2 games, where week 1 is filled with these ideal matchups for the viewer, for the fan, where they're very close and there's a lot of intensity, going to ones that are just frankly lackluster. And that's not to be disrespectful to Bowling Green. Bowling Green clearly took that personally, but there's just not the same level of intensity when you go from at Morgantown against West Virginia to at home against Bowling Green. It just hasn't. And the spread reflects that. The attendance reflects that. The overall excitement for the game reflects that. The matchup. And Bowling Green is better than advertised. That's what I want to finish with. Well coached. Players have bought into Coach Loeffler. Great game plan. They executed for the most part in the first half. And they are talented. They have future NFL talent. They have over 30 seniors, veteran leadership, veteran experience. All of these things can be true at the same time. And that's why you had a 34-27 result between Penn State and Bowling Green. And fortunately for Penn State, they won that game. Whereas the same cannot be said for the Notre Dame Fighting Irish against Northern Illinois. It could be worse. You end up staying in the top 10. You were right there in the thick of it for the college football playoff, now expanded to 12 teams. And Notre Dame, with its documentary style, NFL Hard Knocks type of show, has to recap that situation, has to find answers to that. They're probably regretting that at this point in time. Penn State's 2-0 going into the bye week. They have time to be well rested and figure out the injury situation, and then they meet a caliber of opponent in Kent State before they get to actual Big Ten Conference play, where they take on Illinois, UCLA, before they get to USC and the thick of that schedule. That'll do it for this edition of Locked On Nittany Lions. Still to come, we are going to talk more about the performance and just what it is as an indicator for Penn State's defense moving forward. We'll have Aeneas Hawkins back on the show very soon. We'll talk some Penn State wrestling with all the results that have happened in the offseason, some other Penn State wrestling news, and we'll get the expert himself back, Jeff Byers. All of that is still to come on Locked On Nittany Lions. If you enjoyed this episode, please leave a like on it. I would greatly appreciate it. More importantly, I'd enjoy all of your comments and seeing your feedback and being part of the discussion. So share your thoughts down below. If you're not already, become an everydayer. Subscribe to Locked On Nittany Lions on YouTube and wherever you get your podcasts for the latest conversations around your favorite Penn State sports teams. Again, thank you so much for making Locked On Nittany Lions your first listen and watch each and every day. For your second listen and watch, you got to check out Locked On College Football with Spencer McLaughlin as he recaps the previous week and gets you geared up for the latest weekend of college football, the latest slate of games. Spencer talks about all of it for the news, the analysis, bringing on experts for the specific teams. I've been a guest on that show. I enjoy it, and I know you will enjoy it as well. There is nothing college football related. There is no stone that is unturned over on that show, and that is why it is called Locked On College Football. It's available on YouTube and wherever you get your podcasts, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.